We'll move to question time, and Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Aged Care, Senator Gallagher. Minister, on July 1st this year, your government brought in a requirement to have a 24/7 registered nurse in every aged care home, against the recommendation of the Royal Commission, in the middle of a serious workforce crisis. Just in the last few weeks, the Mount Morgan Aged Care Home has closed because of this requirement. It was announced it will close because of this requirement. This will separate Marlene Seeley from her husband Fred, who has dementia. They were just around the corner from each other. Now they'll be at least a 40-minute drive away. How many other aged care homes have not met your requirement and will close? And how many other families like Marlene's will be impacted by your new requirements?
Thank you, Senator Canavan. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Canavan for the question, and I would start by saying the government doesn't apologise for being ambitious for aged care and for increasing staffing levels to improve the care of older Australians. It's been very clear for some time that one of the issues facing aged care was the lack of access to clinical expertise throughout the day, and that this is one of the ways that we can improve care for older Australians who are living in residential aged care by the provision of 24/7 nurses, which of course has been supported by large parts, almost entirely, of the aged care sector, who agree that this is a sensible and much-needed reform. There has been a sensible exemption arrangement put in place to allow for residential aged care facilities to transition to the new arrangements. And I know that the Aged Care Minister has been dealing with the sector in terms of talking about the implementation of it, and it is a sensible arrangement to acknowledge that there will be areas where nursing requirement won't be able to be reached in the first instance. I will come back to the Senate if I am getting this number wrong, but I understand that so far 55 homes have applied for an exemption, and I think that relates to homes under with homes under 30 beds in MMM 5 to 7 areas, to allow them the time to transition to these new arrangements. In relation to the closures, I will see if there's anything further I can come back to the Senate on. There has been a number of closures. My understanding is, when you look back over time, there has been closures of aged care facilities, not necessarily linked to the 24/7 nursing care arrangements.
That's time. Thank you, Minister. Senator Canavan, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Minister, since your government's nurse requirement came into effect, aged care homes who are eligible for the exemptions you mentioned have been forced to report every 30 minutes that they do not have a registered nurse on site. These are rural and remote aged care homes who are already facing significant challenges and now face significant administrative burdens because of your government's decisions. Sadly, as I've said, we've already seen facilities close because of this. How many more exempted homes will close because of the government's punitive requirements?
Thank you, Senator Canavan. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, again, the government doesn't apologise for putting in place 24/7 nursing arrangements to improve the quality care, and I do find it staggering, frankly, that the previous government, 10 years, who oversaw a Royal Commission whose interim report's title was neglect. Right. Let's not forget that. Neglect.
Minister,
that was how the sector was summarised.
Resume your seat. Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Madam President. Just on relevance, the question went to the government's requirements, and almost immediately the minister's gone to the previous government. This is a decision of the new government, and I'd ask that she be brought to this question about her government's decisions. It's got nothing to do with the previous government.
Thank you, Senator Canavan. The minister was being directly relevant to your question, and I'll continue to listen and draw her to the question if necessary. Minister.
Thank you very much, President. I was just providing some much-needed context for the questions with which Senator Canavan was raising. We have invested billions of dollars into aged care, whether it be through the workforce, to retain the workforce with a wage increase, to recognise that they had been poorly paid, undervalued and underpaid for a long period of time, to retain workers so that we can keep residential aged care facilities, whether they be in the cities or the regions or remote Australia, available for all Australians to get the care that they deserve and that they expect.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Canavan, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. As you have noted, Minister, the exemption required is extremely limited and only for a certain amount of time. Some of these rural areas will never be able to get and meet these requirements. So when will the government consider expanding the exemption required further so that these punitive requirements do not force more aged care homes to close and more families like Marlene and Fred Seeley to be separated at their time of need?
Thank you, Senator Canavan. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And I would remind Senator Canavan, I'm not aware of the case that he references, and it is, you know, and I'm not disrespecting it at all, and I understand the hurt that would cause for that couple. I do accept that, but I also accept that aged care facilities close for a range of reasons, as we have been seeing year in, year out. And that is not peculiar to the requirement for 24/7 nurses. We will continue with a very sensible approach to the implementation of this measure. As we know, the vast majority of facilities have put in place 24/7 nursing care and it does improve the quality of care for those residents in those facilities. And where it is not possible, the department will work with those providers to ensure continuity of care for the residents.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Green.
For Foreign Affairs, Senator Wong. Can the minister update the Senate on Australian-US ministerial consultations held over the weekend?
Thank you, Senator Green. Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Green, for the question, and I acknowledge your deep commitment to advancing Australia's interests in the world. And I also acknowledge, as Senator Watt interjected, that we did hold the AUSMIN talks in Brisbane, and Queensland showed us and our American friends a wonderful welcome, and we're very grateful to the Governor and to the Premier Palaszczuk for assisting us in hosting AUSMIN in Brisbane. As I said, as people would be aware, Mr Miles, Deputy Prime Minister, and I welcome the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, and the US Secretary of Defence, Lloyd Austin, for the 33rd Australia-US ministerial consultations known as AUSMIN. The second AUSMIN since we've taken office, and we were, as I said, very pleased to have this in Brisbane for the first time. Of course, terrible news preceded the meeting when an Australian Army helicopter with 4 aircrew went down in waters off Hamilton Island, and the meeting was held with heavy hearts and a clear reminder of the sacrifices of those who serve our nation. The fact that these AUSMIN consultations are held each year signifies the mutual respect and partnership between Australia and our vital ally and closest strategic partner. And under this government, we are working with the United States to modernise the alliance for a changing and contested world. As Deputy Prime Minister Miles said following the consultations, we will be seeing an increased tempo of visits from American nuclear-powered submarines to our waters as we look towards the establishment of a US submarine rotation at HMAS Sterling later this decade. We also agreed various force posture initiatives to expand our cooperation, including in space. And in a major step forward in our relationship, we are establishing a guided weapons and explosive ordnance enterprise in this country to see manufacture of missiles commence in Australia.
Time for answering has expired. Senator Green, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. I do have a further question. How are the US and Australia working together for our region?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Green, and I do place on record how much of the discussions. Obviously, there's we did hold a press conference afterwards to discuss some of the outcomes, but I would say, in general terms, how much of the discussion focused on how we work together to ensure that our region remains peaceful, stable, and prosperous, and for the betterment the security of all nations, including our two nations as members of the alliance. We are modernising the alliance to ensure we are focused on the priorities of the region, and of course one of the highest priorities is climate change and clean energy. This is, as stated now, was the third pillar of the alliance after the announcement as between President Biden and Prime Minister Albanese, and we are working on implementing the Climate, Critical Minerals and Clean Energy Transformation Compact announced by the leaders, supporting the transition to clean energy in our two countries and in our region.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Green, second supplementary.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Minister. Minister, how are Australia and the United States adapting the alliance for the future?
Minister.
Thank you, Senator Green. Well, first, climate change and clean energy being the third pillar of the alliance. Secondly, we saw future humanitarian responses will be faster and more coordinated in the region as a consequence of the MOU, which will be in place between my department and USAID, working together to pre-position humanitarian supplies in Brisbane and Papua New Guinea, and we are going to work more closely on infrastructure development financing. In relation to AUKUS and AUKUS legislation, can I state publicly we are very grateful for the efforts of the Biden administration in respect of defence export control legislation. This is all about creating a more seamless defence industrial base between our countries. This is about our alliance, which fundamentally strengthening our position, fundamentally strengthening our contribution to peace and stability, and fundamentally strengthening Australian sovereignty.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Ruston.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs. Minister, given your government's claims that you knew nothing about Premier Andrews' plans to cancel the 2026 Commonwealth Games, are you concerned that the Prime Minister nor your government was warned of this decision and the impact of the Andrews government's decision on Australia's international reputation?
Thank you, Senator Ruston. Minister Wong.
The decision to cancel the Commonwealth Games was a decision of the Victorian government, and I know that the opposition wished to try and play a bit of politics with this. Well, I'll take that interjection, and I suggest, Senator, that you might well go to Victoria and express that view.
Order.
But it is not a decision. It is.
Senator Henderson. Senator Henderson, I've called you to order. I ask that you respect that and not continue to call out, particularly to call out to me. Minister, please continue.
Again, this is a decision of the Victorian government, and I understand the political views that Senator Henderson is interjecting with, but ultimately those are positions she ought probably be raising in Victoria rather than interjecting on my
Minister,
answer.
please resume your seat. Senator Ruston.
On a point of order, President, I wasn't actually asking the Minister in relation to the Victorian government. I was asking about the impact of the fact that the Commonwealth government was not consulted on the impact to Australia's international reputation, not Victoria, Australia's international reputation, which I believe as Minister of Foreign Affairs is probably your concern.
May I remind senators, when you raise a point of order, you do it succinctly and you don't add in additional bits. The minister is being directly relevant. In the first statement she made, the minister directly addressed your question. Minister, did you have anything further to add?
I'm happy to add to the answer. I would make the point that I hope tonight everyone will, in terms of Australia's international reputation and particular major sporting events, I hope that everyone tonight will be watching the Matildas as we take on Canada and find our way into the next round of the World Cup.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Minister Wong, I've asked you to resume your seat. Senator Ruston. Sorry, Senator Ruston. Order on my right. Order. Senator Ruston.
On a point of order on relevance, President, as much as I'd love to see the Matildas win tonight and go on to the next round, I was actually asking about the Commonwealth Games, and perhaps the minister might like to be relevant to it.
Thank you, Senator Ruston, and I will draw the minister back to your question. Minister.
Well, I was, in fairness, President, I was asked about our international reputation, and yes, we do care about that. And I could go through some history about some of what occurred under the previous government. My point is, the Commonwealth Games decision was the decision of the Victorian government. Yes, the implication is right in the question that obviously our engagement in international sporting events is an important part of our face to the world. Obviously, this is a decision that the Andrews government has made. I make the point that we are in the midst of hosting very successfully, even if you look at the crowds and if you look at the interest in the game, the Women's World Cup, which is one of the biggest international sporting events that is held, full stop. As Foreign Minister, we
Thank
did—
you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Ruston, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, does the Albanese Labor government agree with Premier Andrews' decision to cancel the 2026 Commonwealth Games?
Thank you, Senator Ruston. Minister Wong.
Well, look, as I said, this is a decision for the state government, and I know that Senator Ruston is inviting me to go walk down Scott Morrison's path, which is always have a go at a state government, have a fight at a state government. Obviously, the blame games that we saw as so much. So much a part of the cabinet of which Senator Ruston was a part. But I would acknowledge it is disappointing news. We have acknowledged that. It's disappointing for athletes, it's disappointing for coaches, it's disappointing for sports fans in Australia. I would make the point also that sport is bigger than any one event, and obviously athletes should have the opportunity to compete at home and abroad. What I also would say is, despite that disappointment, obviously the reasons for the decision have been articulated by the Andrews government, and if the senator has issues with that, obviously she's free to contest those in the public arena.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Ruston, second supplementary.
Thank you very much, President. Minister, given your admission of the disappointment that obviously has been expressed by most Australians for athletes, what do you say to the young Australian athletes who had their hearts set on competing in 2026 and were hoping that experience was going to be the runway for the 2032 Olympic Games?
Thank you, Senator Ruston. Minister.
Well, what I would say to them is I do think it's a little disappointing that the federal opposition want to play politics with a state decision. But I suppose if you have very little to say, if you have a little to say about anything else, but I would say to athletes, I understand the disappointment. People have trained for many years. They would like to compete on their home turf. Of course, people we can understand the disappointment. What I would say is the decision was made by the Victorian government. It's a matter for the Victorian government to explain the reasons.
Order. Order.
Well, Senator Ruston, I don't think any of those words came out of my mouth, but that's fine if you wish to put that. I'm simply making the point that this is a decision that Premier Andrews has explained. We understand.
Thank you, Minister.
That it's
the time for
disappointing
answering
for
has expired. Senator Rice.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Social Services. Minister, the rate of job seeker is way below the poverty line and has been that way for a decade under the previous Liberal government. Your own Economic Inclusion Advisory Committee said that it was seriously inadequate. Why didn't you listen to that committee and commit to, and I quote, a substantial increase in the base rates of job seeker payment and relating working age payments as a first priority, rather than implementing the totally inadequate increase that is essentially just a continuation of Liberal Party policy?
Thank you, Senator Rice. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Rice for her question. Of course, we, as a government, understand the difficulties that Australians are now facing in a whole host of areas, particularly as a result of the mismanagement of the former government in terms of how they handled the economy, how they handled the pandemic and the issues that have arisen as a result of that mishandling. When we came to government, we would have liked to have fixed every single economic problem that Australians are facing, but that simply wasn't possible in our first 15 months in government. But we do understand the problems. We are trying to work through them in a sensible fashion that ensures that we make sensible economic decisions based on all of the economic data that we have at any particular time, but also trying to assist those Australians most in need. I think it's fair to point out that the rates of job seeker and youth allowance and other working age and student payments will rise by $40 a fortnight from the 20th of September. So it's not as if the government is not doing things in this space. We are doing things in this space, but of course, as a responsible economic manager, we want to make sure...
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Rice, first supplementary.
Minister, you say a substantial increase isn't possible. Why, though, are you choosing to give over $300 billion in the Stage 3 tax cuts to the richest people in our society, choosing to spend $368 billion on the AUKUS submarines, choosing a $20 billion surplus, rather than ensuring that people on income support can have more than one meal a day, aren't trapped into a whirlpool of declining health and can afford to live in a house rather than a tent or a car?
Thank you, Senator Rice. Minister.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Rice for her question. And I reject the implication in your question that this is an uncaring government. We have made decisions in the budgets that we have presented since coming to government, where we try and assist those Australians that are most in need and most vulnerable. And I can repeat what I said before, and that is that the rate, particularly of job seeker, will increase by $40 a fortnight on the 20th of September. As a government, we can't just do one thing. We just can't look at issues relating to job seeker. We have to look at the totality of the economic circumstances. That does mean...
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Rice, second supplementary.
Minister, is an extra $4 a day going to fix things for Isabel, who told our poverty inquiry that I've seen how this country treats poor people and it regularly makes me think, hey, maybe death might not be such a bad idea? Or another witness who said, I've had 7 years of pretending to my kids that I'm not hungry or I've already eaten. Or the people who are only showering once a week because they can't afford their hot water bills. What do you say to them?
Thank you, Senator Rice. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Rice for her supplementary question. I think it's, I think it's important that you look at the sort of totality of, what's being offered and proposed in respect of job seekers. So I mentioned the figure of $40 a fortnight from the 20th of September. This increase will be combined with an increase from indexation for those payments indexed on the same day. So, for example, this means that a single job seeker with no dependents will actually receive an increase of $56 a fortnight. So it's not. It's well.
Order. Order.
Thank you,
Minister. Oh, it's time. Senator O'Neill.
Thank you very much, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Gallagher. Could the minister please outline how the Albanese government is delivering on its commitment to establish Medicare urgent care clinics? How will these Medicare urgent care clinics help make it easier for Australians to see a doctor and take pressure off public hospital emergency departments?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator O'Neill for her question and for her interest in Australia's health system. And I hear those opposite laughing at the mention of the Medicare urgent care clinics, scoffing at them.
Minister, please resume your seat. Order. Interjections across the chamber are disorderly, as are interjections generally. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. The Albanese government is establishing 58 Medicare urgent care clinics across Australia with a total investment of $493.5 million over 5 years. These clinics are urgently needed to invest in the public health system to meet the needs of the Australian people who, after 10 years of failure to invest, neglect of the aged care system and failure of the public health system, we have significant challenges facing people who want access to affordable health care, or in this case, bulk billed health care out of hours for non-urgent conditions. And these Medicare urgent care clinics are going to be part of the response, along with our investment in the bulk billing rate, the tripling of the bulk billing rate that we did in our budget, to ensure that the public health system is funded appropriately and that health professionals are supported in the work they do. 16 Medicare urgent care clinics have now opened their doors around Australia, 4 in New South Wales, including in Albury and Wollongong, 2 in WA, in Perth and Rockingham, and 9 in Victoria, including Ballarat and Geelong. Today, the first clinic is opening in Tasmania, in Launceston, and we expect more to be opening over coming weeks and months, including in Tasmania. I know Senator Henderson hates services in Victoria. She opposes investments in Victoria. Well, stop heckling then. Stop heckling. These are good investments for your constituents right across the country.
Minister, please resume your seat. Order. Order on my left. Senator Henderson. May I remind senators there's plenty of opportunity throughout the sitting period for you to make a contribution. Question time is not the time for that. Minister, did you wish to continue?
My 4 seconds, yes. Affordable out-of-hours health care for Australians is something to be supported.
Senator O'Neill, first supplementary.
Thank you very much, President. Minister, the Medicare urgent care clinics represent a new approach. Why are new approaches needed?
Senator O'Neill, please resume your seat. Senator Henderson, once again, you are being disorderly. Senator O'Neill, please continue your question.
Thank you very much, President, for that protection. Minister, the Medicare urgent care clinics represent a new approach. Why are new approaches needed? And how is the government working to ensure that the urgent care clinics are integrated with existing health services?
Thank you, Senator O'Neill. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, Senator O'Neill, for that question and for allowing me the opportunity to talk about how the urgent care clinics are integrated with existing health services.
Senators.
There is no doubt that a new approach was needed. After 10 years of cuts and neglect, primary care is in the worst shape it has been for almost 40 years. Bulk billing rates are in decline. Only 14% of medical graduates now choose to work in general practice, dropping from 50%. But the need for those services hasn't declined. People still need to go to the doctor, they get sick and injured, they still need treatment. And that's why we've been pleased to work with the states and territories in the delivery of this program, because it's essential that the Medicare urgent care clinics align with and support the work that's done by the state public health systems, particularly in relation to the emergency department. We know there was 8.8 million presentations to emergency departments in 2021, and of these, 4.1 million were for non-urgent or semi-urgent conditions.
Thank you, Minister. Senator O'Neill, second supplementary.
Can the minister outline how the government is working with states and territories to ensure that the Medicare urgent care clinics best meet the needs of local communities. Why is it important to work cooperatively with state and territory governments to deliver these urgent care clinics?
Thank you, Senator O'Neill. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator O'Neill for the supplementary. We are very keen to ensure that the Medicare urgent care clinics meet the health needs of local communities, and so we aren't imposing a one-size-fits-all approach, and it is important that we work cooperatively. I know that's a foreign concept to those over there, with state and territory governments, primary health care networks and health professionals on the ground to ensure that these clinics are jointly designed, implemented and integrated with the local hospital and health system. We're jointly developing operational guidance with state and territory governments that outline the type of care the Medicare clinics can do and can provide, and what services MBS scheme items they can bill for. This work is critical to ensure integration with other health services, including GPs and hospital emergency departments. And we know the value of working in partnership with state and territory governments, unlike those opposite.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Housing, Senator Watt. Minister, in the most recent period for which you have the data, how many Australian homes did foreign buyers purchase, and what was the value of those purchases?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Watt. Senator Wong.
I was just going to invite the senator to redirect the question to Senator Farrell. Sorry.
So, Senator Roberts, I take that order. Senator Roberts, order. I'm taking that you're redirecting to
Yes, I
Minister
am. Thank
Farrell.
you.
Thank you, Minister Farrell.
Would Senator Roberts mind repeating the question?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, start the clock again. Thanks.
In the most recent period for which you have data, how many Australian homes did foreign buyers purchase, and what was the value of those purchases?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Roberts for his question. In the last budget, we did take some steps to removing the barriers to foreign investment in the new build-to-rent housing to try and boost supplies of rentals. So while the investment in building new housing is welcome, foreign ownership of existing housing is generally prohibited. And while in some circumstances foreign residents can purchase a home while they're living in Australia, they're required to sell or rent it when they leave. And a vacancy tax applies to any of the property if it's left vacant. As we promised in the lead-up to the last election, we've doubled the penalty for breaches of our foreign investment rules from January the 1st.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Hanson.
Relevance to the question, it was about how much money is being invested by foreign investors, and it's got nothing to do with Labor Party policy or budget.
Thank you, Senator Hanson. I'll draw the minister to that part of the question. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, President. My understanding. Look, I'm happy to get the actual figures. I don't have the actual figures in front of me, but I do understand that it's a very, very small percentage of the overall payment or expenditure in this area. But I will follow up with the Housing Minister and get some more detailed information for you, Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. Senator Roberts, first supplementary.
So the upshot of that is you don't know. Thank you for admitting it eventually. Publicly available data from the New South Wales Treasury covering the entire 2022-23 financial year indicates 1,657 foreign buyers last year purchased housing worth $2.1 billion, suggesting every year in Australia 5,000 foreign buyers purchase $5 billion in housing. Minister, what is your government doing about foreign ownership of Australian housing?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Roberts for his question or follow-up question. I don't accept the proposition that I don't know the figures, Senator Roberts. I've indicated to you that I'm happy to get the information from the relevant minister, this not being my direct portfolio responsibility. And of course she does a terrific job in this area, and I'm sure she'll be able to provide you with some information in respect to it. I'll reiterate the point I made in answering your first question, and that is we have doubled the penalties in respect of this area. I understand that the ATO has approved 1,224 residential retail purchases in the last 3 months of 2020.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Roberts, second supplementary.
Minister, the recent census found that on census night, 1 Australian home in 10 was unoccupied, 10%. We know foreign buyers are buying new property and locking it up so they can sell that property as new in a few years' time after the price rises, preventing renters from accessing housing. This forces rental prices higher. Senator, I ask you again, will the Minister for Housing act to prevent foreign property speculators distorting the Australian property market and driving up rental rates?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Roberts. Look, the quickest way to help renters and, for that matter, anybody looking for to buy a home at the moment, of course, is for the Coalition and the Greens to stop working together to stop our $10 billion housing program. And
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Roberts.
President, thank you. This is a matter of relevance. I asked the Minister to say, would they act to prevent foreign property speculators distorting the Australian property market and driving up rental rates? I don't want an argument between the Greens and the Liberals.
There was also the first part of your question, which went to the numbers from the census and went to holding stock. So I think the Minister is being relevant, but I'll draw him to the second part of your question. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Well, look, I explained to you in the 2 previous answers I've given to you that this government has actually acted to increase penalties on the things that you're actually complaining about. So to accuse us of doing nothing in this area is completely wrong, Senator Roberts. But I reiterate the point. There is a way of dealing with the issue that you're worried about immediately, and the way to deal with that immediately is for the Coalition and the Greens.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator McDonald.
My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Minister, in the context of the highest inflationary pressures in over 30 years, including huge energy price spikes, Victoria has banned gas connections in new homes from 2024. According to Victoria's own energy reporting, average per unit electricity price are 2.6 times higher than gas. Minister, how does forcing Australians away from cheaper gas ease cost of living pressures?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, I will start by reminding those opposite that they voted against the price caps and the energy bill relief that we put in place in December last year, which has significantly lowered—
Order. Minister, order. Order on my left. Order. Minister, please continue.
Are you a bit embarrassed about that one?
Thank you. Which voted against those price caps, which has significantly lowered the price that households will be paying this year, as supported by and acknowledged by the Reserve Bank, by the
Minister,
Treasury,
please resume your seat. Order. Order. Senator Brown. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. So the government's focus, the Albanese government's focus, has been to put downward pressure on energy prices, including the energy bill relief that will flow to people's 5 million Australians' winter bills in the next little while. Our support for energy upgrades and energy efficiency, and in fact, and in gas, is that it does have a role to play as we transition to a net zero economy. It is not federal policy to ban gas connections, but we do acknowledge that states and territories also are implementing their plans around their transition to net zero as well, and that this is a matter, really, a question that should be asked of the Victorian government, but I can certainly stand here and answer the steps that we are taking. We are mindful. We know that energy prices are hitting households. That's exactly why we took the action we did in December last year. We got ahead of it. And again, let's not forget, when we came into government, we had an energy crisis on our hands that the Minister Bowen was dealing with from day one, to stabilise energy markets, to manage it, to work across energy providers and other stakeholders, and do the work that, frankly, should have been done by those opposite in the 10 years they were in government.
Senator McDonald, first supplementary.
Minister, was your government consulted prior to Victoria announcing their decision? Was this a topic at the recent AusMin conference? And will you provide assurance to Australian families struggling with the cost of living and rule out any plans to extend this ban on gas connections across Australia?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, I would again say it's not federal policy to ban gas connections, but this is an area where the states and territories have responsibility. Certainly from our point of view, we're not considering a nationwide ban on new connections, but recognise that states and territories are having to consider the future of gas in their own energy mix.
Order.
In terms of consultation, my answer to that is that I know Minister Bowen and Minister McAllister work very collaboratively with state and territory colleagues about how to transition Australia in an ordered way to a net zero future, which, you know, used to be your policy too, I think, net zero, wasn't it? Although, yeah, you just didn't have any detail about how you'd get there. But we do work with state and territory governments because we have to work together in the national interest.
Thank you. Before I call you, Senator McDonald, I'm going to remind senators in the chamber that conversations and calling out across the chamber is incredibly disorderly, and I would ask all senators to listen respectfully to the questions that are being asked and the answers being provided without the constant interjections. Senator McDonald, second supplementary.
Minister, Labor governments across Australia, including the ACT government, continue to introduce policies that drive up the cost of living pressures, like banning access to cheaper energy. Why do Australians always pay more under Labor?
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Minister.
Well, that's simply not true. It's simply not true. And the example you give in relation to the ACT, which went to 100% renewable energy years ago when I was still in the Assembly, actually saw their bills go down this year because they are using a renewable energy mix, which is cheaper often than other sources of energy. So it's simply not true. And we have been 100% focused on meeting cost of living pressures or supporting households to deal with cost of living pressures, including in the area of energy, which we inherited, frankly, a total and utter mess when we came to government, and we have been methodically working through it, including the legislation that this Senate passed without your help at the end of last year, which put downward pressure on those energy bills, and supporting households, 5 million households to have support on their winter bills that you also opposed.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McKim.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs, Senator Watt. Minister, offshore detention has been a humanitarian catastrophe. It's resulted in murder, death, rape child abuse, including child sex abuse, armed assault by military forces and deliberate government-sponsored attempts to kill people by withholding food, drinking water, electricity and medical support. It was deliberately designed to harm innocent people, including children, by making their lives so unbearable that they were coerced into returning into the dangers that displaced them from their homes in the first place. The cruelty was a feature, not a bug, and now there are credible allegations of serious and systemic corruption involving millions of dollars of Australian government money. Will the government establish a royal commission into immigration
detention?
detention?
The time for asking your question has expired. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator McKim, for the question. Last week, I think we all saw that a number of very serious issues were raised concerning the administration and governance of regional processing contracts and payments under the former coalition government. These are concerning allegations, and Mr Dutton, as the former Home Affairs Minister, has a responsibility to explain what happened on his watch as Home Affairs Minister. When these relevant revelations came out, the government sought and received an immediate assurance that contracting and payments are being made according to law under this government. But we do need to get to the bottom of what has happened with taxpayers' money. As soon as these matters were raised, the government took action to be assured that governance arrangements were appropriate and called for evidence to be shared with the appropriate authorities. Now, Senator McKim, you may not have been aware of this, but just before question time today, the Minister for Home Affairs announced that the government will appoint Mr Dennis Richardson AC, a former Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and Director-General of ASIO, to conduct a review of integrity concerns and governance arrangements for the management of regional processing administration by the Department of Home Affairs. These issues do merit detailed and thorough examination, and the review will consider them in the wider context of serious issues that have emerged over many years. It will not canvass the policy of regional processing itself. The review will cover any integrity concerns about contracting arrangements regarding regional processing, whether public or otherwise, including the allegations and concerns raised by 60 Minutes and the 9 papers, the department's governance arrangements, oversight processes and systems for managing offshore processing, current and historic, including in relation to the engagement of subcontractors by head contractors, and any other related concerns regarding arrangements for regional processing administration.
Senator McKim, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, offshore detention is one of the darkest and bloodiest chapters in Australia's story. Unless we have a royal commission with its independence, with its transparency, with its rigour, with its public hearings and powers to compel evidence and testimony, how are we ever going to write the conclusion to that chapter? Don't you agree that the matters you've just outlined are too narrowly scoped and will ultimately result in a cover-up, not the answers we need?
Senator McKim, I called you to order. Minister.
Thank you, President. Well, no, this government does not have any intention or any desire to assist with a cover-up of the claim that Senator McKim is making in his usual overreaching style. And I have, and the government has, full confidence in Dennis Richardson as one of the most esteemed public servants this country has produced to deliver a fully independent and thorough review, and that's why we have appointed him to do so. In conducting the review, Mr Richardson will have regard to previous and any ongoing investigations, including by the AFP, AUSTRAC and the National Anti-Corruption Commission. He will seek information as appropriate and necessary from any Commonwealth agencies to support this inquiry, and I can confirm that the Minister has sought the full cooperation of her department in this regard. So we have full confidence that this is the appropriate way to handle what are very serious allegations, and we have every intention of getting to the bottom of them.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McKim, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, given the repeated excoriating reports into the Department of Home Affairs by the Australian National Audit Office, the extensive criticisms of the department by multiple Senate inquiries and the department's ongoing failures to meet the most basic governance, oversight and probity standards, how can your government possibly have confidence in the Secretary of the Department, Mr Pizzullo, and will your government stand him down while the Richardson inquiry is ongoing?
Time for answering has expired. Minister.
Thank you, President. The short answer to the question is no. The Secretary of the Department is serving a 5-year term, having been reappointed in 2019, but the Minister for Home Affairs has sought and has been given assurances that current arrangements for regional processing are lawful and address identified governance risks. But we do acknowledge that there have been serious issues within the Home Affairs Department, particularly during the time that Mr Dutton was the Minister. And, Senator McKim, you will remember that I asked many such questions as an opposition senator in Home Affairs estimates. That's why we have now appointed Mr Richardson. I realise, Senator McKim, that your questions were probably drafted before that was announced. You're clearly not interested in the answer, but we have full confidence that Mr Richardson will get to the bottom of what are some very serious issues and provide the government with high-quality advice about how these issues should be managed going forward.
Thank you. And I just remind you, Senator Watt, to direct your responses to the Chair. Senator White.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Senator Watt. Is the Minister aware that, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, 2.6 million Australians are employed on a casual basis, and over 270,000 of these workers have had regular work patterns for more than 2 years, and they are often referred to as permanent casuals. These workers are working in permanent capacities without the job security of benefits that come with a permanent position in law, and they lack leave entitlements and can be dismissed without notice. Does the Minister believe this would be what most Australians would expect to be the definition of casual work? And what is the Albanese government doing to stand up for Australia's 2.6 million casual workers and provide them with the choice to obtain secure work? What is being done to close casual employment loopholes left by the Liberals and Nationals?
Thank you, Senator White. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator White, for that very thorough and detailed question. And I know that you, along with pretty much everyone on this side of the chamber, has a very long history of standing up for the rights of workers, including casual workers. Currently, the definition of a casual within the Fair Work Act is based only on the original offer of employment and does not take into account any subsequent conduct of the parties. Unfortunately, what this means is that some employers are exploiting this loophole, treating employees as casuals, even if they work regular and predictable hours. And I've certainly met many such workers, whether it be in the coal mining industry in central Queensland or in many other industries across the country. There are thousands and thousands of casual workers who have been stuck in casual employment arrangements for too long, and it would appear some opposition senators seem quite content for that system to remain in place. Those casual workers are being used as though they are permanent workers, without the security of permanent employment, just because of what is written in their employment contract. So this is the legacy of the former coalition government, the party of low wages and the party of insecure work. In 2021, the coalition introduced legislation to legitimise a blatantly unfair definition of casual employment. Then, extraordinarily, they voted down the other provisions of their own bill. The minister at the time, and I wonder who that might have been, oh, that's right, Senator Cash, and the coalition government voted against criminalising wage theft and the better off overall test because they were so focused on taking rights away from casuals. That's Senator Cash's record as the IR minister and the coalition government at the time. So what was left was an unfair and unreasonable definition that has now been in effect for 2 years. If the contract said you were working as a casual, that was the end of the story. So the Albanese government's workplace relations reform agenda will introduce a new, fair definition of casual employment.
Thank you, Minister.
That will
the time
benefit
for
all.
answering has expired. Senator White, first supplementary.
Is the minister also aware that more than 40% of casual workers are over the age of 35, and many of these workers tell stories of not being able to go on holidays or take time off when they are unwell because they simply can't afford it? Given that many Australians are working multiple jobs because none of their individual jobs give them enough hours to cover their expenses, how do the government's casual worker reforms contribute to its commitment to improve job security in Australia?
Thank you, Senator White. Minister Watt.
Thank you again, Senator White. As you would recall, Senator White, it used to be that those who were in insecure jobs tended to be students or people looking for some short-term work. Now, all too often, it's people trying to support a family or run a household. Now, too many Australians are stuck in insecure work, particularly those workers who've been stuck in casual employment arrangements for too long. The latest figures show that there are approximately 851,000 casual employees with regular working arrangements. But these workers do not receive paid leave entitlements. They may struggle to make financial plans for the future. They are more likely to expect to lose their job for involuntary reasons. They are more likely to be underemployed, and they are more likely to be female. There are legitimate uses for genuine casual employment, but indefinite casual employment should never be used as a loophole to undercut worker pay and conditions. The Albanese government will close this loophole, and we hope the whole chamber will join us in doing so.
Thank you, Minister. Senator White, second supplementary.
Minister, women represent almost 50% of Australia's workforce, and the majority of workers who have been casual for more than 2 years are women. How does the government's workplace relations agenda further contribute to its commitment to improve gender equality?
Thank you, Senator White. Minister Watt.
It is a great question, Senator White, because the latest figures show that women are overrepresented in casual employment in Australia. That is the legacy of 10 years of coalition government. 53% of the 851,000 casual employees with regular working arrangements are women. 56% of the 278,000 casual employees with long-term regular working arrangements are women. 55% of the 753,200 casual employees who've been employed for more than 2 years are women, and 57% of the 457,500 casual employees who were underemployed in August 2022 were women. Again, that is the legacy of 10 years of coalition government, women being disproportionately overrepresented in casual employment. And the latest data shows that the average weekly earnings for casual employees is approximately half that of permanent employees, on average a difference of $846. We're fixing this loophole.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Nampijinpa-Price.
My question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Indigenous Australians. In the October 2022 budget, the government announced $5.8 million for an independent Makarata Commission. What does the Minister expect this commission to do?
Thank you, Senator Nampijinpa-Price. Minister.
Thank you, President, and thank you to Senator Nampijinpa-Price for the question. As Senator Price would know, we have made substantial investments through the May and October budget to ensure that we are supporting improvements in outcomes, and particularly in closing the gap in those key priority areas for Australians First Nations people, and frankly ensuring that those investments are targeted.
Sorry, Senator. Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Nampijinpa-Price.
Point of order on relevance.
Order. I've got a senator on her feet. Sorry, Senator Nampijinpa-Price. Would you start again?
Thank you, President. Point of order on relevance. I'm speaking specifically to the $5.8 million for Makarata Commission.
Thank you. I'll draw the minister to that. To your question.
But it's in the context of yes, it is. It is. And I'm happy to get to it, and I give you a commitment I will get to it. I am talking about the investments we made, because we made a number of investments. The senator's question goes to investments made in the budget, including I acknowledge the Makarata Commission, which I will get to, but I am also saying that the government is doing a range of things to support additional investments in First Nations communities to deal with the gaps that we have in terms of health outcomes, in terms of engagements with the legal system, in terms of housing.
Gallagher, please resume your seat. Minister, please resume your seat. Order on my left. I've called a number of you, Senator Ruston particularly. The interjections are disorderly. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. And that investment is to support one element of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, which included constitutional recognition through a voice to our nation's parliament,
Senator Ruston,
truth-telling and treaty.
Minister, please resume your seat. Order on my left. Senator Henderson, order across the chamber. Order. Minister, please continue.
Well, I mean, that's been around since 2017, so I don't know if you've had your head in the sand since. You had your head in the sand since then, Senator Henderson.
Minister, please resume your seat. Order. Senator Ayres. Senator McKenzie. I have reminded senators that comments across the chamber are disorderly, as is the noise level. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. So the government has been clear that we will establish an independent Makarata Commission to oversee a national process for agreement-making and truth-telling.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Nampijinka-Price, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. In an interview last week, the Minister for Indigenous Australians said the Makarata funding was really code for treaty. Can the Minister confirm that this is correct?
Thank you, Senator. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Thank you, President. The Makarata Commission will fund and support local models of truth-telling in partnership with First Nations communities, community and church groups and other levels of government. The Commission will create an official record of the stories being told and heard, including stories of survival and culture, colonisation, massacres, discrimination and resistance. And the Commission will also work closely with a First Nations voice when it is established. I think that is well understood. I'm not sure the concern that's been raised over here, what that's about, because people have understood that the Makarata Commission is an important
Minister, please
part.
resume your seat. Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Nampijinka-Price.
Thank you, President. On a point of order, does the minister agree with Minister Burney's comments?
Thank you, Senator. The minister is being relevant. Minister, did you wish to continue?
Thank you. I think I've answered the question. I have explained what the role of the independent
Senator
Makarata
Ruston.
Commission would do. I support the work of Linda Burney. She is an incredible Member of Parliament, and she's doing an incredible job in leading this and ensuring that people understand the positive impact.
Thank you, Minister.
Of
the time
voice,
for answering
through
has expired. Senator Nampijinka-Price, second supplementary.
Thank you. I'll take that as a yes. Why does the Prime Minister say this is not about treaty, yet his Minister for Indigenous Australians seems to think so? Can the Minister explain to us who is right and who is wrong?
Thank you, Senator. Minister.
Thank you. The government is focused on supporting the Yes campaign to support constitutional recognition through a voice to Parliament. We believe that working together on this generous offering from First Nations people around how to bring the country together is around consultation and listening, recognition through the Constitution of the rich history of this country that dates back 65,000 years. We are working together with First Nations communities around the country on this, and it's about bringing the country together.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Nampijinka-Price.
Thank you, Madam President. Point of order on direct relevance. Can the Minister please explain to us whether it's the Prime Minister who is correct or the Minister for Indigenous Australians?
Thank you. The minister's just informed me she's finished her answer. Senator Wong?
I ask that further questions be placed on